Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Question with Pastor Adam. And I am Adam, and I am pastor to believers and to doubters, to unfaithful Christians and to faithful atheists. And Jesus was not afraid of questions, and neither are we. So here we go with some questions today. Today is a special edition of One Question with Pastor Adam. We've never done this kind of show before. This is, I don't know what to call it, a mailbag episode, a Q&A episode, whatever. We're going to go after some questions here today, and some questions that you have sent me over Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So, well, I've got some questions that we're going to go over. And if you've got questions and you would like to explore them today in kind of this rapid Q&A format, feel free to put your questions in the chat section, and we'll try to get to them. So welcome everybody. It's hope you're doing well today. It's February 2nd. Which means Valentine's Day is coming up. And somebody told me about a month ago on Instagram, here's the first question of the day. Can you make the "I will always love you" quote from Whitney, Dolly, and God into a shirt? And I said, yes, let's do that. The answer is yes to that one. So that's what we did. Here it is. I am modeling it for you now. We also have it in pink. Pink for, I don't know, Valentine's Day. It's awesome. So here it is in pink. If you're interested, you can go to the church website, c-ucc.org, for that. I wanted to tell you about a few things that I have coming up at the beginning of the show. On February 10th and 11th, I'm going to be at the Open and Relational Theology Conference. We have interviewed Tom Oord before on the show a couple years ago. And also, we have interviewed Jonathan Foster more recently about his book, Theology of Consent, Mimetic Theory in an Open and Relational Universe. And I'm going to be on a panel talking about Jonathan's book. Enjoyed the book, enjoyed the conversation that we had with Jonathan. So if you are interested in that conference, it is online. And if you just Google Open and Relational Theology Conference 2023, I'm like, what year are we in? Like it takes me till October to be like, oh yeah, that's what year we're in. And we're just in February. So Open and Relational Theology 2023, and you'll be able to find it there. I think it's a $40 registration fee until February 4th. So 2 more days and you can register for $40. There's a lot of talks at this conference. Open and Relational Theology has influenced me quite a bit, along with mimetic theory. That's why they invited me to join on Jonathan Foster's panel about his book. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, so that's online. Anybody can go. Also, in the middle of February, on the 16th, from 7 to 8:30 here at the church at Clackamas United Church of Christ, we're going to have Gareth Higgins. Gareth is a good friend of mine, and he is from Northern Ireland. He's a peacemaker. You may have heard of like the conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland, and how that has been such a big problem in Northern Ireland for decades, and they're starting to figure things out. Gareth is going to come and talk about his book, How Not to Be Afraid. And I've got his book here on the shelf. I will just grab it because I know it's right here. Yeah, here it is. How Not to Be Afraid: 7 Ways to Live When Everything Seems Terrifying. There it is. Fantastic book. Interviewed Gareth many 2 years ago or so about the book. So he's going to come and talk with us. This will also be online on Zoom. We're planning to do it on Zoom too. So he's going to give a presentation about his book, and I'll be there. And it's always a good time with Gareth. So even if like you're just like down for some Northern Ireland accent That's fantastic too. He's such a great guy. So, and what else? On February 18th, that's the Saturday, Gareth and beloved American singer songwriter David Wilcox will be at the church doing an all-day workshop called Medicine Stories, Weaving Stories, and Song. And so, if you're interested in that, I will put the link to that in the chat section. That's going to be great too. So let's see. Comment assistance. Now, why are you able to? Why can't I post? There we go. Ah, I was it was the system is rigged against us people in more ways than one. I'm having a hard time seeing your comments and also posting comments. So there's it's slow, but it's getting here. So this is the Saturday event. So here we go. Joshua, good to see you. Glad you could catch us this morning. Mary, my friend, good to see you too. Thank you for being here. And so those events are free, and this event on Saturday, if you want to sign up for that, uh, uh, you can do so there at those links. So, all right, so let's get to some questions. If you've got some questions in that you want to put in the chat section for today, this is a special mailbag episode, and if you have ideas or comments, responses to these questions, I would love to see your responses too. I mean, this is one of the things that I love about this show is that it's very interactive, and you can put your responses in the comment section, and that's great too. So, are you ready for some questions today from the mailbag? Here we go. Here's one from, I think these are from Instagram. Uh, Vera Bisoli asked this: how do you keep Christian when Christ is left out of it? Do you feel that? Christianity nowadays has nothing to do with Jesus. It's just a way to control people. This is often a criticism of religion, that it is often just a way of controlling people. And Vera, I love that you have caught on to the fact that when religion is used to control people, that it is not what Jesus was about. Right? I mean, this is inherent in Vera's question: is there's something wrong with the way that Christianity is today? And Vera, I want you to hold on to that. You get it. Hold on to that, because Jesus here, throughout his ministry, is pointing to the fact that there is something wrong with the religious and political establishment of his day. And when Jesus is doing this, it's important to remember that he is in line with the prophetic uh, Jewish line of thought, the prophets that came before him, right? Jesus and the prophets before him always rose up when the political, religious, and economic leaders were not doing what they thought God was calling them to do. When they were trying to control the masses in order to gain more power, more wealth for themselves, the prophets always came along and said, "Hey, you're doing this wrong." And this is where the prophets and Jesus, I think, come together in an important way. Conservatives tend to say that that the prophets are only concerned with worshiping the right God, with idol worship. You can't worship false gods, right? They say that's what the prophets are all about. Well, liberals, progressives like myself, I think rightfully so, end up saying, no, the prophets are far more concerned with justice. And by justice, we mean not so much punishment against people, but far more concerned with a justice that seeks the benefit of the community, the beloved community that Martin Luther King always talked about. Martin Luther King Jr., the greatest, maybe the greatest prophet of the 20th century, used justice in the way that the prophets of the Bible, of Jesus, used justice as well. not primarily as punishing people, but as a way towards meeting the needs of those who are on the margins, of those who are suffering. And so the prophets would ended up saying that if you aren't meeting the needs of uh, of those who are in need, then you are worshiping the wrong God. You're worshiping the God of wealth, the God of they would say yourself, your own, the God of power, the God that leads you to only care about yourself and not about the needs of those that God really cares about, which are those who are on the margins. And so this is where Vera's question comes in so importantly for me, is that the one of the biggest criticisms, rightfully so, one of the biggest criticisms of religion is that it's just a tool to keep people down. It's just a tool that the powerful use in order to keep the status quo, right? Nothing could be further from the truth when it comes to prophetic religion and when it comes to Jesus. And so when religion is used to endorse or even enforce the status quo, you know something's wrong. You know something has gone wrong. And Christ, as Vera says, has been left out. Why? Because Christ was a rebel rouser, causing some good trouble, going to the temple like Jeremiah did before him, going to the temple and saying, hey, you all are doing this wrong. This is a very important Jewish move that Jesus makes, going back to the prophet Jeremiah, right? Even you can even go all the way back to Moses and Miriam and Aaron when the Hebrew people cry out to God. Actually, that's not the case. The Hebrew people just cry out. That's an important part of the story. They don't cry out to God, but God hears their cry. I mean, the whole point of this story, if you read Black liberation theologians like James Cone, um, the whole point of this story is that God hears the cry of the oppressed. James Cone's book, The God of the Oppressed. God hears the cry of the oppressed and works on their behalf for freedom. So God here is not the God of the powerful, the God of the oppressors. God is the God of the oppressed, leading towards more and more freedom. And the question that Moses is going to ask, the question that the prophets are going to ask, that Jesus is going to ask is, are you on board with God's liberation project? Can I get an amen in the chat section? And the answer is yes, we should be on board with God's liberation project. That's what Jesus is wanting us to do, to get on board with that, and the prophets as well. So I love Vera's question because it sees that Christ has been left out of Christianity when Christianity is just used as another tool of oppression, right? So this is that Jesus in if your church goes by the lectionary, the lectionary tells us what passages to read. We just read the Beatitudes last week, and the part of the Beatitudes says, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who seek righteousness. Blessed are those who thirst for righteousness, who work for righteousness." Righteousness here, we typically think of being in right relationship with God. But righteousness is also being in right relationship with our fellow human beings. And in fact, the word for righteousness in the Hebrew and in the Greek of the Bible uh, can be translated as righteousness, which tends to be our relationship with God, but it can also be translated as justice. Righteousness, our relationship with God, is always connected to justice, our relationship with our fellow human beings. You cannot be in right relationship with God if you are not in right relationship with your fellow human beings. And what does it mean to be in right relationship with your fellow human beings? It means to work for the common good. It means particularly to work for those who are poor, marginalized, who are experiencing you know, tragically, the racism that has infected the United States and the systems of racism, the systems of classism that have infected the United States from the very beginning. Uh, uh, Seems to me the prophets are always pointing us in the direction of them, and moving in a way where we ensure that everybody is living in what King called the beloved community, working for the common good. That seems to me to be the project. And and if you're not working for that, the prophets say you're worshiping a false god. Jesus says, his biggest criticism is worshiping mammon, wealth, greed. Those are the big things that Jesus is constantly fighting against. Not, not, by the way, being gay, something Jesus never mentions. So, along with Vera's comment about like when Christ is left out of Christianity, Christ is being left out of Christianity when Christians are like attacking our LGBTQIA2 plus siblings and not concerned about the things that Jesus is concerned about, which is excessive greed and hoarding of wealth. So there we go. There we go. Hey, we are like 22 minutes into this thing. Let's keep going. So, all right. So I've got some more questions here, but let's see what we've got in the chat section. So, good morning, Lita. Good stuff. Joshua, I have a million questions. Let's go, man. Let's see them. Trying to hoard money and control the masses. Yes, Luke, that when religion and the powerful of religion get caught up in that, that is where Christ is being left out. It's where Moses is being left out. It's where the prophets are being left out. And so it's a big deal. On the sermon last week, we had we had Isaiah, and it was this passage. It was either Isaiah or Micah. I can't remember. It's the prophets all say the same thing, pretty much, which is along with Martin Luther King Jr., so informed by the prophets, where the prophets routinely say, I don't care about your sacrifices. God does not care about your sacrifices. Your sacrifices mean nothing to God because you aren't working for justice. You aren't working for more kindness in the world. And it was Micah 6:8. What does God require of you? Not these sacrifices, but to what is it? Seek justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. So these are the things that I want to inform whatever Christianity we are going to be working for. And that's how Vera's very good question. You keep Christ in Christianity. Keep Christ in Christmas. Keep Christ in Christianity. How about that? So, Gwendolyn, my kids are asking to go to church, but a progressive church is hard to find in a deep red area. I am conflicted. Gwendolyn. I forget. I think you've told me in the past where you are, Gwendolyn. I can't remember. But there is, let's see. I think if you go to my link tree, you can find a link to a website where you can find good progressive churches. I can't remember what it's called. But if it comes to me, I will let you know. I'll try to find it here. I can't find it, but Gwendolyn, I'll try to put in the comment section when I find it a way to do that. Luke says, unfortunately, progressive churches are mostly going to be in the cities, not the suburbs. I say unfortunately because that's a fact due to rural, urban, social class divides. Yeah. There are. I was surprised here in Portland's a bit of an anomaly, but we've got this place that's actually pretty far out in the in places that you would never, in a place where you would never expect a liberal church to be, and it is it is right there. They are open and affirming, and we have a couple of churches like that out here in the rural areas of Portland, and I think that they're there. Um, and it can they can be really hard to find. Now in the rural South, they may not be there, and I would love, Gwendolyn, to try to help you find something that would work for you and for your children. So feel free to message me, and I would love to do what we can to try to help you with that. Um, so let's see. Most denominations are about the money and the power. Yeah, unfortunately. So yeah. So Mississippi. Yeah, Gwendolyn, contact me and let's see if we can find something. So uh oh, goodness gracious. Joshua is getting to it. What did Jesus mean when he said raka? Now I remember talking about this before, but I cannot uh remember exactly what raka means. Jesus says raka. What is this? Uh okay, fool. I think that's it, right? Uh and whoever shall say to his brother Raka shall be in danger. This is a great question. I would need to do some research on this, Joshua. Raka, I think is, let's see, got questions. There's this website, Got Questions. I don't like it because it's very evangelical. Raka comes from the Aramaic term reka. It is a derogatory expression meaning empty headed, insinuating a person's stupidity or inferiority. Yeah, so foolishness, I think, is it. Jesus, it's interesting because Jesus says, um, it, if you call somebody a fool, you will be liable to judgment. And then Jesus goes on and calls his disciples fools. Oh, it's just so funny. So this is Matthew chapter 22, I think. But I say to you that everyone who is angry is liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the councils, and whoever says you fool, I think that's Raka, right, will be liable to the hell of fire. Now, if you look at this, Jesus, this is one of the things that's so important about the sayings of Jesus because they are often like wisdom sayings of natural consequences. I think is what Jesus is getting at here. But when I hear Matthew 5:22, where Jesus says, "And whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire," I immediately like my mind goes to, "Oh, God is going to send these people to hell," right? But Jesus doesn't say that. He doesn't say that God is going to be the one who is going to make you liable to the hell of fire. He just says he takes God out of it. So what do we do with that? I think what Jesus is saying, and if you follow his pattern of calling his disciples fools, right? Jesus, this is a little tricky, but follow me here. Jesus is saying when we get caught up in these relationships where we're antagonistic, where we are calling one another fools, that it's going to have natural consequences to it. And maybe there are times when we have to use this kind of harsh language in order to try to make a point. And if you do use harsh language in order to try to make a point, know that there are consequences to doing that. It's like I keep going back to Martin Luther King Jr. here, right? It's like John Lewis, MLK, when they say go out there and cause some good trouble, right? They're also saying know that there will be consequences, right? And that means for people like me, particularly who have lighter skin, for white people like me, they're saying this is especially on you to go and cause some good trouble, get yourself into good trouble, and know that there are going to be consequences. Know that, like, when you use this kind of language and you use these kinds of non-violent tactics in order to cause some good trouble, that there are going to be consequences for that good trouble. And if you have some privilege, please use your privilege in a way that causes some good trouble, even if that has consequences for you and you get into trouble for it. If you're going to cause some good trouble, you're going to get into good trouble. You're going to get into trouble. That's what Jesus does. And so maybe I think in this Raka question, this great question that Joshua is asking, it's also can be a very confusing question, because if you call people names, if you call them fools, that is going to have consequences. Just beware of the consequences and be willing to go through those consequences, be willing to have to deal with those consequences. I have a good friend here in the Portland area. Many years ago, when ICE was doing their stupid thing and rounding up uh, um, immigrants from Central America, here, who are living here in the Portland area, South and Central America. Uh, there was a call out to clergy. I wasn't here at the time. There was a call out to clergy um, to cause some good trouble, to go and sit in front of the ICE place and try to make it so that they couldn't get out. And my clergy friend ended up going there, sitting in protest, and got handcuffed along with the other people in the circle, and were taken off to jail. And he says that the police treated him really, really well. And he said, I'm glad that that's a privilege that I have of being a white person, to be treated well by a police officer. We have seen the racism of policing in the last week. This last Sunday, I preached a sermon how white supremacy continues to infect the United States, even our policing, including our policing system. And people were like, there were some folks who were like, "How could that be? How could it be white supremacy because the 4 or 5 officers were black?" Well, this is a whole system that thinks that it can do anything to black bodies and get away with it. That's white supremacy right there. And when you try to be a cog in that wheel, when you try to cause some good trouble, there are going to be natural consequences in a white supremacist system. And any of us can get caught up in the white supremacist system. Why? Because we can start benefiting from it. We can start using it and benefiting from it in ways that we think are good and valuable to us. But the white supremacy system doesn't care about you. It will run you over, even if you try to play by its game. That is what we have learned in the events of the last week. So there's a lot of work to do, a lot of good trouble to cause, and that might be what Jesus is getting at. When you call someone fool, know that there are going to be consequences, and you will be liable to hell. Not that God is sending you to hell, but that your fellow human beings, when you are calling them out on their stupidity, Jesus calls his disciples out, calls them foolish. And what happens next? Natural consequences. His disciples abandoned and betray him, all the way to hell, which for Jesus was the cross, right? We all experience our hells here on this earth. And a lot of those hells are due to natural consequences. And it's sometimes, you know, Christianity, the other problem with Christianity is that it is so often used as a hell avoidance project. Whereas Christianity, if we're following Jesus and he says, take up your cross and follow me, might be not a hell avoidance project, but an entering into hell in order to change the systems that keep producing hell for people. Um, so that that might be, I don't know. Is that a helpful way, Joshua? I hope that that helps a little bit. It's a really great question. So, hey, Haley, love you too. And Annalise says a colleague uses turn the other cheek as a reason to avoid conflict. To me, it means to not seek revenge. When is some of these situations where Jesus showed constructive conflict? Well, I think Annalie, that is perfect. I think this whole Raqqa conversation, I hope, is leading to some constructive conflict. Um, Jesus goes to some of the religious leaders of the day and calls them a brood of vipers. I don't know if that's constructive conflict, but that is some serious conflict. Jesus is not about avoiding conflict. Jesus is not about peace for the sake of peace, right? This is where Jesus says that it, he did not come to bring peace, but the sword. Now, don't take this literally, right? Because Jesus never literally carries a sword. And in fact, when the disciples use a sword to try to protect Jesus, he says, put your sword back in its place, for all who live by the sword die by the sword. So, what does Jesus mean when he says that he did not come to bring peace but the sword? Jesus does not make peace with the status quo of peace, right? Jesus comes in and disrupts the status quo of peace because it isn't peace. It's not peace, right? The prophets do the same thing. The prophets that make it into the Bible are considered the true prophets, in part because they call out this false peace. They say things like, "You say there's peace, peace, but there is no peace." Right? There are people who are starving to death. There are people who can't feed themselves, who can't care for themselves because the system is stacked against them, and we need to change the system. That is not peace. Jesus here, when he says, "I did not come to bring peace, but the sword," he goes on to say that he has come to separate, to divide families against one another, fathers against sons, and mothers against daughters, and daughters-in-laws against mothers and mother-in-laws, and one's own family will be one's own um, enemy, something like that, right? And so when Jesus says that he did not come to bring peace but the sword, he says that that's saying, I came to bring conflict. I came to bring conflict with the status quo as it is. And so, Annalie, I love what you say here when turn the other cheek is not a reason to avoid conflict. Jesus is inviting us to go straight into conflict in, Annalise, as you say, not in a spirit of revenge, but in a spirit of dealing with it, right? Um, and so, what the tragically, and I'm a part of this. Tragically, the church, our culture, does not do a good job of teaching us how to deal with conflict in ways that, as Annalie is saying, are constructive. Oftentimes, we go into conflict, metaphorically here, guns a blazing, wanting to be right, and wanting to shame the other, prove that we're right, which means that the other has to be wrong. That's not a great way of dealing with conflict. You know, our especially, I don't know if this is especially the case, but in my experience as a man, I'm not taught to talk about my feelings, to talk about my wounds, to talk about where I have been hurt. Maybe a good way to deal with our conflict is not to go in guns a-blazing, demanding that I'm right, but to be able to talk about how we have been hurt in this situation, not to so much blame anybody. Maybe there's a case for blaming someone in certain situations, but how much more of a spirit of like how that affected me, um, how I responded to certain situations. This creates a sense of vulnerability. admittedly. And if we are in a place where we can be vulnerable with people, that's great. The other thing that Jesus does, that Jesus says to his disciples, is that there might come a point where you have been so embedded in a conflict that you just have to shake the dust off your feet and move on. Sometimes it gets so bad, and many of us have experienced this with our family members during the last six years or so, where maybe it's just time to shake the dust off your feet and move on. Maybe those relationships are being more of a burden to us than anything positive to us, and it's just time to move on. There's a place for that too. But the other point in Jesus's ministry, Annalie, that I think is important for your question is Jesus says, I think this is in the Sermon on the Mount too, somewhere in Matthew 5-7, where Jesus says, if you have an issue with your brother or sister, your sibling, and you're on your way to the worship space to give your sacrifice to the worship space, put your sacrifice down, stop going to the worship space, stop going to the church, and just go try to make amends with your sibling. So here Jesus is putting the priority of some form of reconciliation, some attempt of reconciliation above even going to worship, even making sacrifices to God, worshiping God. Your relationship with your neighbor, your fellow human being, your sibling is more important than your worship of God. That should come first, right? Uh, so this is another point where Jesus kind of flips the script on religion, because typically we'd think, oh, well, my most important relationship is with God, so I'll just go to the worship space and make my sacrifices, and then I'll go and try to seek reconciliation with someone else. No, Jesus says, no. Uh, Go try to seek reconciliation and then make your sacrifice to God. Now, you might be able to you can probably find an anti-sacrificial reading of this text, because once you have made reconciliation with your family member or your friend or whoever, you may find that you don't need to make that sacrifice to God because you've already taken care of the issue. So yes, Annalie, Jesus is not about avoiding conflict. Jesus is about entering into it, hopefully in healthy ways. Now, when Jesus calls his religious opponents a brood of vipers, I don't know if that's constructive criticism or not, but he's willing to take the consequences for it, right? So, whew, that's good. Let's see. Oh, good, Joshua. I'm glad that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that makes sense. Yep, got to stay in good trouble. Good trouble. So, uh, Haley says, "Justice with grace makes me think of Jesus." I like it. Yeah, we could use some justice with grace as we enter into this. Uh, yeah. Yep. Uh, let's see. Joshua says, "Can we talk about that handful of verses at the very end of Mark? Have we found out those last parts?" I'm not sure, Joshua, what you're talking about there. Mark, the last part of Mark is questionable. It seems as though it's a later addition to Mark. Mark, the original Mark, seems to stop at the crucifixion. And I think it stops at just after the crucifixion, actually, where the women, I'd have to go and look, but I think it's the women in Mark, the people in Mark, go and see the empty tomb, and then that's it. And you're supposed to figure out, the original Mark was, hey, what do you think happens next? Right. But the early Christians were reading that and they were like, we can't leave this up to people's imaginations. So they added in a resurrection story at the end of Mark to to make it so that you didn't have to use your imagination so much. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about, Joshua, but if you've got other things in Mark that you're talking about, that it is added later, the resurrection story in Mark, that it's added later, is an interesting detail. For me, it doesn't like take away from the resurrection story. I know that a lot of us, I want to tell you why the resurrection is important for me. And it basically boils down to this, that so like we ask, like, is the resurrection true? Did it historically, did it literally happen? And those kinds of questions for me, like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to. And so here's how I have uh, come to view the resurrection stories. I come to view them as something that is ultimately true. Now, whether they literally happened in human history, that for me, that is a matter of faith. And there are some Christian apologists who try to argue, oh yes, it literally happened, and here's how we can tell. Whatever. If that helps you in your faith, fantastic. But I hope that your faith goes along with the truth of what the resurrection is getting at. What is that truth? Well, you may have heard of other resurrection stories in human history. They tend to be kind of like ghost stories. Like this person has been resurrected, has come back in order to seek revenge on the people who murdered them or harmed them during their life. The Christian resurrection story is radically different. This is the key to understanding the resurrection. Jesus is resurrected not to seek revenge against his enemies, but in order to show us what God is truly like in this world. The cross and the resurrection have at least one common theme in them, and that is that the God character, Jesus, never seeks revenge. Jesus never prays for revenge on the cross. In fact, what does Jesus pray for on the cross? Forgiveness, not revenge. This is what God is like in the world. And when Jesus comes back in the resurrection and shows up to his disciples in that locked room, the disciples are afraid. Of course they are afraid, because here's this guy in their midst that they have just abandoned and betrayed to the cross. And what are they thinking? They are scared poopless. Do you like that? I was like, what word should I use here? Okay, poopless. Yes. They are so scared because this man that they know has died is now in their midst, walking through walls, and they are so scared. And what does Jesus say to them? I think it's in John chapter 21, right? What does Jesus say to them? Peace be with you. The first words that Jesus says after the resurrection to the male disciples are peace be with you. Now, the first words that Jesus speaks are to Mary, Mary Magdalene, who comes to the garden, and Jesus says to her, Mary, and then he says, "Go tell the men." Go tell the men who are off doing their thing once again, not here with me, but here you are, Mary, being the faithful disciple. Go tell the men about the resurrection. This is Mary being the first preacher of the resurrection. Can I get an amen in the chat section? I love this story. It's so good. And then later, Jesus appears to the disciples who are cowardly in a locked room, in an upper room. They're locked in that room because they're afraid of the authorities who have just killed Jesus. They're afraid of Jesus, who's in their midst. And what does Jesus do? He comes back and he offers them peace. He says to them 3 times, peace be with you. Why? Because they have got to be so scared of this man who might be coming back to seek revenge in all of the divine wrath, right? The resurrection, these resurrection stories, for me, show us that God has no wrath, that God is, as the letter First John says, God is love, and in him there is no darkness at all. And how do we know this? That God is love, period. That God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. How do we know this? Because of the resurrection. Because the resurrection tells us that we can do our absolute worst to the God character. And how is the God character going to respond? By coming back not in revenge, but offering peace in return and inviting us to share that peace with one another. If this so people who say to me, yeah, I believe in the resurrection, that Jesus was bodily raised from the dead, good for you, but I don't really care. I don't care. Does it change the way that you live your life? Does it start to change the way that you live your life? Because we're all just trying to figure this thing out, right? I'm not there yet, right? As this is why it's so important, as Jesus is trying to transform our world, as we enter into these systems of oppression, trying to cause some good trouble in this world. Are we also able to hold on to this sense of peace? As Joshua started us off with the great question, when we go in and start calling people fools and start using this language that is going to cause some good trouble and get us into trouble, are we able to take that piece of Christ with us as Jesus lives his life? And he knows that it's going to cause him some consequences, going to the hell that is the cross. Is he is able to take God's peace with him as he goes through this intense suffering, knowing that God is there with him. You know, a lot of people point to when Jesus is on the cross, they point to the passage where Jesus says, my God, why have you abandoned me? My God, why have you forsaken me? Right. And that for many people is like, oh, there it is. God abandoned and forsake Jesus on the cross. There it is. There's our evidence for it. And if you want to go in that direction, feel free. But there are other directions that you can go. And one of the first directions is that Jesus here is quoting Psalm chapter 22, where it starts off saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? And as you go throughout Psalm 22 and you read it, you discover that God has been with the psalmist the whole time, never abandoned the psalmist, never forsook the psalmist, but it was actually humans who forsook the psalmist. And the psalmist thought that everybody is against me, and so God must be against me too. Have you ever felt that way? When the world is just feels like everything is falling apart and maybe God has turned against you too. Guess what? The psalmist felt that way. And Jesus felt that way while he was on the cross. But what is the truth of it all? The truth of it all is that Jesus, almost immediately after that, says, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. The Father's hands are there the whole time, holding Jesus through this horrific experience where humans have turned against him. And that's what that passage is getting at. Jesus has this experience that we all experience of this God forsakenness, this abandonment from God that we all experience. And is it true? The truth is, yes, we all experience that. But the truth underlying it might just be that God's hands are there the whole time, holding us in this space. And it's hard to feel that. It was hard for Jesus to feel that too. All right. Mary is dropping some Brian Robinette. I love it. As Brian Robinette says, lots of attention to crucifixion, but not so much on the resurrection. Yes. We are a What is the saying, Mary? Like every Sunday is a resurrection Sunday. Yeah, because we've always just gone through Friday, and we're on our way to Sunday. We're on our way to the resurrection. We're on our way to the truth that God is, that we have the here's the truth that I take upon myself. I invite you to take this upon yourself too, if you like it. If you don't like it, you don't have to, of course, right? This is just everything I do is just invitation. And one of the invitations that I think the Gospels are leading us, I don't know, I'm still figuring this out, leading men to do is to recognize ourselves in the disciples, right? This is where Mary and one of Mary and my mentors, Rene Girard, has been so helpful for me, is to see how the disciples mess things up over and over and over again. And Jesus always comes back and says, hey, let's try again. Let's try again. Like Jesus hasn't given up on the disciples. And the resurrection is God coming back to us and saying, hey, I see you messed up there. And I still believe in you. And let's try again. Whew. I love it. I love it. Annalise says, these words about resurrection brings me new inspiration and new perspective. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Hey, Princess, good to see you. Mary says, why does it appear necessary to progressives to minimize the resurrection? Seems like, yeah. I don't know why. I get that, Mary. I get that. Like I do see. I think that the resurrection is one area where progressives really could do a lot better, because I think that we just get caught up into questions of, I think the resurrection is one area where progressives tend to mirror the fundamentalists without recognizing that we're mirroring the fundamentalists. So if the fundamentalists say, oh, you have to believe in the resurrection, especially a literal resurrection, then progressives might just, uh, go to, no, we don't. I'm not going to believe the resurrection. And I don't think that that's healthy. I think moving it to another level of understanding the resurrection. It's kind of like, oh, what's his name? Peter Rollins is a progressive Christian, and Peter Rollins says that he was once asked. You can Google this; it's so good. You can. He was once asked, "Do you believe in the resurrection?" And Peter Rollins says, "No, I don't believe in the resurrection. Why? Because I. What does he say? Because I don't. When I see a poor person, I don't care. When I see somebody homeless on the street, I do nothing about it. And if I actually believed in the resurrection, I would do something about it. I would see that Jesus has resurrected in my neighbor who is suffering from oppression, from whatever, who is just suffering. That is where the resurrected Jesus is in the world. So do I believe in the resurrection? I might say yes, I do, but my actions say no, I don't believe in the resurrection. Whew, Peter Rollins. So all of that to say that, I mean, that is Peter Rollins is being very self-critical about himself in saying that he doesn't believe in the resurrection because it should lead him to something more in the world. And that is a confession on my part too. Oftentimes when I talk like this, I am afraid that I am bringing a sense of guilt onto people because when I walk by a homeless person, I might uh I might have a feeling of compassion inside of me for that person, or I might not. But overwhelmingly, what I have is a sense of the world's problems are just too big for me to solve, and there's nothing that I can do about this. That's my confession to you. Maybe some of you feel the same way, and that's where I hope that we can change systems so that we know that we are all in this together. Uh, we are in this with one another, and we are in this with our houseless siblings, our siblings who don't have health insurance. We're all in this together. And what can we do to make it better for all of us? I think that's what King is getting at in the beloved community, what Jesus is getting at in the realm of God or the kingdom of God that he talks about. So, yeah, Teresa, thank you for this comment. Thank you. Thank you. I love it. I love it. Amen. Amen. Yeah. So, friends, I need to get going here pretty soon. Uh, let's see. Hussam Rajad, why is the current church being so tolerant when it comes to principles that go against what the Bible preaches? I would have to find out Hussam, what it is that you are talking about going against what the Bible preaches. So feel free to put that in the chat section if you'd like. Mary says, helpful. What you are saying about progressives and fundamentalists being mimetic doubles on resurrection and both to a degree missing the point. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it. Joshua says, the poor will always be with us, and we must use caution, compassion, and discernment when walking near the houseless folk. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because Joshua, that's a reference to Jesus saying that the poor will be with you always, and also to Deuteronomy chapter 15, where I think Jesus is quoting. And Deuteronomy 15 says that if the people, as they are coming into the promised land, if the people share of what they have, there will be no poor among you, but there will always be poor among you because the people won't share of what they have, right? This goes back to the Exodus story when the people are coming out of Egypt and God, the people complain and they're like, "Hey, we've got no food. We would rather be back at the flesh pots in Egypt. Flesh pots. There's an image for you." So they're like, "Why can't we go back to Egypt where at least we have food?" And so God like sends down the manna from heaven, makes sure that they've got enough food and water to eat. And God says, hey, this is going to last you as long as you need it, as long as you share, right? As long as you share of what you have with one another, the food will not spoil. Well, human condition or whatever you want to call it, the people start to hoard their food because they don't trust in the fact that God has just told them there's enough for everybody if you just share. It is so hard to trust that there is enough for everybody. And so we naturally tend to just kind of hoard things because we assume that there's not enough. There's a lack of abundance, there's a lack of enough. And so we just have to hoard things for ourselves, and the food spoils in the story. But not only does the food spoil in the story, their relationships start to spoil too because they start to distrust one another, right? And so really, I mean, that the whole like the whole movement that came around in the 90s where it said all I really needed to learn I learned from in kindergarten. I mean, they were on to something there. It's just share. Can we just share our stuff? It sounds so naive, right? But there's a lot of truth to the to what we often think is naive. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much. Brad, thank you for being here. Thank you for your comment too, Brad. I appreciate it. So this was the mailbag episode, our first mailbag episode. And I only got through one question of the mailbag, which is appropriate for the title of the show, I guess, but we had a lot of great questions and topics in the chat section. So friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments and your questions. And maybe we'll do some more mailbag episodes. I don't know. I was like, what am I going to talk about today? Let's just do a mailbag episode. So sometimes I don't know what to say. And so then I don't do the show. And so maybe we'll just do some more mailbag episodes. This was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you too. So God has no only children. We are all children of God, Teresa. Amen. Amen. Oh, Joshua, thank you. I'm so glad. I'm so glad this is healing. So, friends, thank you for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day. You can keep up with One Question with Pastor Adam wherever you listen to podcasts. If you happen to listen to podcasts on iTunes, if you could leave me a review, I would really appreciate it. That would be awesome. We try to be live here every Thursday at 11 o'clock Pacific. So would love for you to join us then. And if you like this episode, feel free to share it with folks that you think might be interested. So hope you have a great rest of the day. And until next week, friends, God be with you.